Spring in Blowing Rock normally means the opening of business with the arrival of visitors and seasonal residents. Rental spaces, parking spaces, all full as shops and restaurants see the return of business. But as late winter 2020 began to give way to spring, a strange change came with the last snow and the first blossoms. We all learned new terms like social distancing and new realities of shuttered shops, takeout-only restaurant food, face masks, gloves, and fear. Coming from a half world away with something called Covid-19. The economic impact came fast and hard, and many of the small business owners were blindsided as they were trying to stock shelves and open doors. The timing was particularly bad in Blowing Rock, but a local group, the Village Foundation, working on their next project at the American Legion Park, met to decide how they might help, and the Rock United Relief Fund was formed.
Well, Steve, the Village Foundation is an organization that was formed about 3 years ago with the explicit purpose of providing funding for economic development and business development projects in the town of Blowing Rock. It was essentially put together to try to lessen the burden on local government to be responsible for all the projects. It's a tragic what has happened with the COVID-19 pandemic. And not only is it tragic on a global level, we're starting to really feel how it impacts us on a local level. Blowing Rock is essentially a town made up of businesses that survive as a result of tourism traffic, and with the stay-in-place orders, the tourism traffic has really diminished to zero. We had the good fortune of having an idea brought to us by Tim Hilton, who was the person who conceived of this idea to create a relief fund that might help the businesses in the town of Blowing Rock. He mentioned it to John Aldridge. John Aldridge is on the board of the Village Foundation and was essentially the founder of the Village Foundation. And he brought it to our board, and we quickly refocused our efforts away from current project-based fundraising towards what can we do to create a relief fund, a business relief fund for the businesses in Blowing Rock.
And as Jim was saying, we were focused on our next big project in Blowing Rock, and in fact it had it preliminarily approved by the Town Council of Blowing Rock when the COVID-19 virus came upon us. And we had in fact been thanking Charles Harden, the head of our Chamber of Commerce here in Blowing Rock, and I had already been talking about what our focus should be going forward as the Chamber focuses on businesses and as we focused on projects in Blowing Rock. About that time, Tim Hilton, a friend and resident of Blowing Rock, called me one morning and said, "John, we need to do something to help our businesses." And as everyone knows, when you think of Blowing Rock, you think of our Main Street. We have an idyllic Main Street, and it's very much what Blowing Rock is. And that Main Street is made up of our small businesses. As Jim said, most of which are mom and pop businesses. So Tim and I talked, then I talked to Charles, and we came up with the Rock United Relief Fund. Having come up with the idea, it's always a danger to come up with an idea in Blowing Rock because it'll come back on you. So I called him back and said, "I think this is what we should do. Great idea. I want you to chair the Grants Review Committee." So you have to be careful when you come up with an idea like that. We developed a grant application for use in connection with the grants. Charles at the Chamber had put out the word in the community through social media, and also our mayor, Charlie Sellers, was an integral part of the early days of the Rock United Relief Fund because he put out a letter from the desk of the mayor announcing the formation of this fund, which gave it the confirmation of our town leader of the Village Foundation doing this.
I thought I knew a lot of the pains that small business would go through, but the COVID-19 presented a whole new problem to everyone. Recessions typically come slowly and come back slowly, and this was like falling off the edge of a cliff. And the effects that we're having on businesses, small businesses in particular, were just devastating. Blowing Rock is made up of virtually all small businesses. And small businesses typically are just like the average consumer. Most small businesses have very little working capital, and they live from week to week, paycheck to paycheck. Working capital is not a large element of their business financial statement. And in this community, they survive during the winter, so they do have they try to build their reserves. They try to make it through the winter, through the good months. So as people are prepared, coming back into the spring this year, most people were feeling very good. They had had a very good 2020. They were anxious for another successful year, and then the COVID-19 hit and began to present all kinds of problems that they had never anticipated. So what they felt good about in terms of their reserves that they had built up as small business were quickly becoming eliminated, and fear set in rather quickly. But Blowing Rock, you are correct, Steve. Blowing Rock is made up of virtually all small businesses. And small businesses are in the very nature of the business, not well capitalized, and present themselves in a significant danger when cash is basically cut off, which is what happened in this whole event of just shutting down virtually the whole country. But the stories that we heard were just heartbreaking. People that had worked for 25, 35 years building their business, being successful during this last 10 years of growth, seeing their businesses improve year after year for 10 straight years, albeit gradual. And then to have that come to such an abrupt end, and their fear of losing, not only whether they were losing a rent payment or being late, but losing the business entirely. And it was a big struggle, very, very, very difficult for every single one of them. I don't think we interviewed anyone that was not in pain, some obviously more than others. And it was heart-wrenching, just to say the least. What is so really interesting and so really heartwarming about this is to see this whole town come together to support the businesses in town. It was a true team effort. It was a true joint effort, and all the elements of this community joined hands. As Aristotle said, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and this is certainly the case in what turned out with the Rock United Relief Fund, to say the least. What we took away from it is just how emotional their well-being was. I mean, their sense of pride was affected. The sense of pride of being able to ask for a grant was quite emotional for quite a few people. We had people in the community that thought about asking for grants and realized they weren't as bad off as others. And the beautiful thing was to see people that probably would have been given a grant of some size actually said that belongs to somebody else who is in greater need. You want to talk about being able to take away a message for everyone, to see that type of joint community effort and the concern of the well-being for their friends, their neighbors, their loved ones. That's very heartwarming. That's a great question. I think that, we'll all want to forget the pain that everyone is going through during this crisis. I think we're all going to wind up stronger. I think we're all going to wind up as a better understanding of other people's needs. I think the outcome of this, in my mind, as an optimist, is that we'll be a better place, a better world. It won't be just Blowing Rock, but there are many places that will be stronger as a result of this, that have a sense of well-being for the communities that they live in, and the improvement of all of us. I think we'll be stronger. I think that this will result in it. Is it going to be over by summer? We don't know. No one knows the answer to that. But I think the fighting spirit that I've seen in the interviews, these people will survive, and they will come out of this with a much better sense of well-being, a much better sense of self, and a great deal of pride in having succeeded and managed their way through this. And we're going to do everything we can to help them through that as we progress.
I would just guess the impact of it coming from within is just a much more powerful statement for those who live here and work here.
So it's a great point, and you're right on target. It's the comments that we get back from those that have received the grants is they can't believe that their neighbors reached in their pocket and said, "How can we help?" It's different than, as you say, different than the government offering or making some type of tax break or some type of grant or some type of program. The fact that we were able to react so quickly, the fact that we were able to get money in their hands within less than a week after we talked to them, they just were overwhelmed that their neighbors would again reach in their own pocket and offer help. They said they loved Blowing Rock before, they love it even more now, having experienced that. So it is again to see the reaction, to hear the reaction. But I think this community is going to be a better community as a result of this.
These folks here really are, they do have it right that they are part of a community that really loves this town. And the Chamber's byline is love Blowing Rock, as you know. So they know that there are a lot of folks out there that love this community, and some of them don't even live here. That when we set up the GoFundMe page, there were a lot of people that came in on the GoFundMe page with a couple $100 donation that were just visitors that saw it and said, yes, how can we help? And so, but they come here year after year. This is their place they like to come to. So they enjoy what we have here, and they want it to stay the same, and anything they can do to help with that. We're fortunate that way. I don't think that exists in other communities. So, not to the degree it does here.
And we were so very appreciative to, for people we didn't even know to come up and say, we're going to help you guys out. I mean, you just don't get that very often. And you can't imagine how grateful we are.
But I can, good neighbors, good friends. And, thank to everyone in Blowing Rock for the support. To me, that's a lot. There is a lot.
If you're a quilter or a crafter or you like handmade things, this is the kind of shop that you seek out. And so, I debated a little bit about, is that something that I need to apply for? And I looked at the application and I spoke with a couple folks and realized, this is something that could really help. And then I saw the fundraising efforts and realized that, wow, folks are being so generous. People who have no idea who I am, or, they don't know my name, they don't know my family, they don't know, my history or why I started this, but they're believing in me and they're excited for, what downtown Blowing Rock is. They believe in what downtown Blowing Rock has to offer. And as a small business owner, that was just a boost, just to know that, there are people out there who haven't met me who believe in what I'm doing and want to support me and want to see me on the other side.
I was just very grateful, and hopefully I'll get to meet him someday and express my appreciation.
It was a real personal thing, this grant application thing, and like a lot of towns seem too big to really care about their merchants and don't really pay attention, but we were really lucky. And we saw it the day it came out in the paper or wherever it came out through the chamber, and we applied right away and got the interview, and we were very fortunate. We really are appreciative.
That was really encouraging, and I came away from that feeling really upbeat, and actually reached out to another business friend here in Blowing Rock who hadn't applied yet and said, you need to do this because this is for you just like it's for me.